Hello, I'm Grin, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Build Request. This request comes from Vivian Hun, Slim G21, and Jesus the Savior. So, suffice to say, people in high places have been wanting this one. And it is of course a request for a crane, which I aim to make fairly functional, which means it's going to need to be able to both lift its arm up and down, and also rotate on the X-axis. Now, to begin with, that may well sound like a fairly familiar descriptor of motion, a sense of deja vu no doubt triggered by the fact that such a range of motion is also shared by the design of the advanced turret, and indeed for this build we're very much borrowing from that design. Though between the two, there is one glaring difference of functionality in that turrets are more often than not used to shoot at things, whereas a crane often picks things up and puts them in different places. And it is specifically because of this difference that at the end of the crane is not an egg gun but instead a sticky ball, and one of the first things we had to establish was that the sticky ball could reach down far enough to the ground from the crane's arm. And once soundly established, it was time to move on to the functionality of the arm, namely being able to make it pivot or dip or whatever you'd like to call it, which was rather easily achieved with a basic application of a couple of tow bars. And so, having successfully given the crane the majestic motions of a dipping bird, it was time to move on to the more complicated side of things, namely allowing the entire crane to rotate from the base of the tower on the X-axis. This was probably the part of the build that took the longest, largely because there was a lot of calibrating to do, with adjusting the weight of the vehicle, both the base of the vehicle to try to anchor it down, and also the tower and the arm itself. When it comes down to it, the actual mass distribution of the build is not exactly ample for the functionality we're trying to achieve, but it is what a crane looks like, so we've got to work with what we've got. And eventually through a mixture of freewheeling tyres and also directional fans, which once again is basically a micro version of the one from the advanced turret build, the crane was both rotating and dipping rather well. If you're looking to learn more about the mechanics behind it, I go into it in far more detail in the advanced turret, a builder's guide to nuts and bolts. The final bit of functionality that I needed to add was to be able to make the entire rig move. This of course presents slight difficulty, as the way you move the actual tower is by using the small propellers at the base of it, which are of course triggered by the same trigger on the controller that would cause your vehicle to accelerate normally if using engines. You could of course get around this by using a suck and blow or something as an alternative method of movement, but it would look really silly for this vehicle, and so instead I simply ripped off of a part of design from the Pelican, where you've got the engine just sitting in a sort of cradle, and you disconnect it and reconnect it whenever you need to actually move. And I must point out that the two of the vehicles share somewhat of a poetic similarity, as they are both of them mechanical marvels named after creatures of the avian variety. But I digress. With that done, all that was left to do was a heck more tweaking with the weight distribution of basically the entire vehicle, from its base to its arm to its tower to its counterweight, which eventually led finally to this almost complete version, which moved and functioned extremely smoothly, and then all that was needed was a fresh coat of paint, and there you have it. A working crane in Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. I am really quite happy with how this one turned out. It was a fun build to do, and the final result looks absolutely great. If you like this vehicle in your own save, what's going to follow now is of course the layer by layer of it, so you can copy it over. And as always, with all of that said and done, thanks for watching, and until next time, I have been and still am Grim Grindle. If you'd like to follow me on social media, a link to my Twitter is in the description below, and if you'd like to join the Channel Grim and Grin Discord, the Echo Chamber, a link to that is also available.